Okay, so we're here at the Crisp Ellert Museum, and we're looking at the Lenny Foster exhibition. That supposedly is 3 bodies of work from Lenny. And in this project here, you call yourself a collaborator and an intern collaborator. So tell us, what does that mean with this photo exhibition that we're seeing now?
So I'm a student at Flagler College. I'm a senior in the art history department, and In the Spirit of Lincolnville was the project that I undertook for my honors capstone. So I worked on the publication for the museum. I wrote an accompanying essay to apply a framework for the exhibition, as well as 2 poems, one of which is based on this lovely lady behind me and her sister's life story.
Mm-hmm. And that what you're holding in your hand is?
This is the publication that accompanies the exhibition.
All right. And you say there's 2 poems in there?
Yes, sir. One of them is titled Growth, and the other one is Uprooted.
All right. I know Lenny told me they were extremely beautiful, so we'll check them out, definitely. All right.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm here with Lenny Foster, and this is an exhibition of his works. And Lenny, you are a local. You live here in St. Augustine?
A local yokel, yes.
Yes.
I have been for 6 years.
Yes, that was my other question. How long? 6 years. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with you, and one thing that you keep bringing up many times when we talk about St. Augustine was about all the history that was here that you had no idea ever happened or existed. Could you tell me a little more about that?
Yes. I came out here from Taos, New Mexico, from the southwest to the south. I think that may be another book in the works, because it's quite a different place. But anyway, after about a year, I moved into Lincolnville. I took an apartment into Lincolnville, and I knew next to nothing about the history of St. Augustine, African-American history, which dates like 450 years or so, and the civil rights history, which of course dates back to the late 50s. So I moved in a little apartment in Lincolnville. I had just separated, and so I'm boo-hooing, and I said, I need to do something. So in the evenings, I would go out and ride my bike. And it was then that I discovered the Accord Freedom Trail markers that were placed in front of historic buildings in Lincolnville, and reference historical events and historical people. And I was blown away by who I saw was here, Of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Robinson spoke at St. Paul AME Church, Ralph Abernathy, Hosea Williams,
Andrew Young.
Andrew Young, of course, was here a couple of occasions. And of course, I discovered all of the local, seldom talked about civil rights heroes, brave, most of them at the time, young people who were standing up against segregation and racist policies. So my little discovery, I called it my night school, because every evening for a while I would ride around, look at these markers. I would visit the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center, is where I learned a lot about the history here, of course. Scott Grant did a presentation of the summer of '64, a documentary he was working on, so I learned a lot from him. I would go to the Accord Freedom Trail Museum and discovered more history. And then I started visiting these historic sites, like the first churches for African Americans, of course, were built in Lincolnville. The First Baptist Church, which you see here, that was built in 1872, and then St. Paul's AME, 1873, then St. Mary's Missionary Baptist Church, 1875. Then you go to St. Cyprian, 1888, St. Benedict's, 1898. And if you can think about, Lincolnville was established in 1866. If you can think about newly freed slaves starting their lives, starting their community, and building, of course, churches are the foundation of the community. So I started discovering these sacred sanctuaries, and I started photographing them. I also started photographing. When I learned about this history, I would take shoes and place them in these historical places representing historical people, and I'd write a little narrative. because I didn't know the history, and I'm sure many others, both here and abroad, didn't know the history. So I thought this was a great way for people to access the story by looking at an image and being drawn into the image, and a good way for people to stand in someone's shoes to get a better understanding of what was happening then and how that relates to what's happening now with civil rights in the country. So I started that project, and then I started going around to these different historical buildings at night when it was quiet, and there's nothing modern about them, you know, it's just the feel, the spirit of Lincolnville, which is what I wanted to capture. It was what I was taken by. Not so much present day Lincolnville, you know, because the landscape has changed, the demographics has changed, people have come and gone, businesses have left, but their spirit remains. So somehow I wanted to capture that. And so I had the Where We Stand series with the historical events that I dedicated some time to and imagery to. And then the structures, and then which I call, when that particular body of work of the nighttime shots, I call when dreams became memories, because these structures, they were built on dreams, right? And now, you know, those times are gone, and now they have become memories. Of course, the churches are all still alive and well. And then I wanted to get some firsthand history. So, and during my artist residency, I thought, you know, I want to talk to the people that have been in Lincolnville to find out what their lives were like back then and now, and firsthand information, you know, about the African American community there, about civil rights, and just about their lives in general. I mean, how wonderful it feels when someone says, "Tell me about your life," right? And I don't know who has asked these people, some of them. So I would sit on their porches, where in the South and African American communities, a lot takes place on the porches, right? And so in a couple of these homes, these porches were the go-to places in the neighborhood. People always knew that they could go to Miss Janie's porch and they would get some love and some wisdom and maybe some good cooked food. And the same with these two sisters, Gwendolyn and Dolores. Their house was the house on the block where all the kids would come and gather and play, and it was safe. And so I sat on their porches and they would tell me about their lives back then, and how beautiful. And, you know, with the landscape and the community changing, you want to try to hold on to whatever sweetness, whatever good memories you can. That sustains me more than, you know, what's going on here in present day. And to sit on the porch of Miss Janie, where Dr. King sat and ate her food and slept in her house, and to go to Miss Cora Tyson's house, where Dr. King loved her iced tea, so he would stay there on a couple of occasions, and she would tell me about him and their visits and feeding them at midnight and listening to the protesters that were running back from the plaza after being beat or threatened, running back into Lincolnville, screaming and yelling, and how she didn't understand this nonviolent movement. She didn't like it. She said she got in Dr. King's face because she didn't understand what that movement was about. But to sit at these people's feet and listen firsthand to what they experienced was just such a blessing. And it's truly made me fall in love with St. Augustine in a different way. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love the galleries and shops and museums, of course, but to understand what happened here and why it happened here and how this city was formed, how it was built, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The organic core.
Yes.
Call that, yeah. But it's interesting because when you came here, you already had a very successful career as a photographer. You know, your galleries up in the Southwest. And I've seen a lot of your work, floral, landscape, indigenous, Native Americans, First Nation people. And I have to say that when I look at all your work, the only word that comes across is spiritual. And this is a spiritual work in itself. So it's interesting that you go from these ancient landscapes to the hands of so many people, priests indigenous, other people.
Right, right.
And then suddenly you come here and somehow you gravitate once again to something so spiritual, you know. I find it so interesting.
Yeah, so do I, Jorge. You know, when coming here, I was wondering, like, what in the world am I going to focus on? Because I was leaving a sacred place. I felt an enchanted land, as they call it. And coming here, I said, what in the world am I going to do?
Right.
And then I realized that spirit is everywhere, in everything, in every place, in every person. So look for that. Try to be that one, and look for that. And so slowly, the work has developed, and and I'm constantly creating, no matter what's happening in my life, the good, the bad, the ugly. When I feel like dancing down the streets and when I'm crawling on my hands and knees in pain, I still create. And I think the work, that adds to the work, because I maybe approach it not on an analytical level, but a feeling level.
But that brings this other question. As so many African Americans who express their physical world through a form of art, you could have been a painter, you could have been a jazz musician who wrote a piece, you know. Why the camera for Lenny Foster? Why was the camera his brush or his musical instrument?
You know, I think it's just grace. You know, I bought a camera on a whim. You know, I was working in the car business up in the Northeast in D.C. and needing something to do. It was a crazy business, crazy environment, not the healthiest.
Very toxic.
And so, working a crazy number of hours a week. And I bought the camera, and the camera, unbeknownst to me, would just slow me down and have me focus on what's right in front of me, the present moment. I couldn't be thinking about the past or the future in that moment of creation. You know, I remember early on, I would look into the viewfinder and everything else would disappear. And of course, with my addictive personality, I wanted more. I wanted more of that, right? So I kept shooting, and then it's led to this beautiful life I have of creation. I wish I were a singer, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, I had asked you a question before. I know this exhibition just has a very small portion of your work, and this is what the museum decided to exhibit, what they liked, and of course what you liked is here. And I asked you the question, if you could save only 3 pictures out of this exhibition, meaning your favorite, which would be your 3 favorite?
Well, if I had to save 3 images, it would be hard. I would bargain for a 4th. But I would say one would certainly be my friend Dr. D. Israel, who came from New York, came from Harlem, New York. She was in Harlem doing the Harlem Renaissance. Came here, of course, in St. Augustine several years ago. And she was one of the first people I met and was enthralled by. I think I probably met her at the Lincolnville Museum. And at the time I met her, she was a young, spry 92. I believe. So
I think she's 100 now?
She just turned 99.
Oh,
and she was here the night of and got a lot of love. People wanted to get a picture with her, get a picture with the picture. But this is in St. Benedict's, in St. Cyprian's Church. She's one of the oldest members in more ways than one of that congregation. So I wanted to, it was her sanctuary, is where she gleaned her wisdom, some of it. So I wanted to capture her in that beautiful natural light. And, you know, if you've ever been in St. Cyprian's, it's like you're in the bow of a ship. And it's beautiful, and it's very organic, and it feels comfortable. And the light, of course, is very sweet. So I wanted to capture her in there. And for the most part, I think she liked the images, but the images are just a bonus. You know, I think the real gift, the real blessing was just being in her presence. And you know, being with elders, sometimes they don't need to say a whole lot. You're just around them, and you can absorb part of their wisdom, part of their knowledge. 99 years old, she has seen and done a lot. So this would be the first one that I would go to. And she told me once, she looked at me during her birthday. I sang a song to her, a Nat King Cole tune, Love. I sang that to her during her birthday, and she looked at me, she says, if I were a bit younger. You gotta love it. So the second image, or pair, that I would say would be these structural images, architectural images in Lincolnville at night. And I believe this is the first one that I photographed. Then riding my bike in the evenings, I would ride down to Maria Sanchez Lake and circle that a couple of times and then head back to my apartment. And I would pass this house on the corner, I think it's South Street and King. And I loved, I don't know if you call it a clapboard house, but I love the old screens, the faded wood, the brightly colored window trim, the old school chain link fence. It just felt like home. I never met the people that owned the house, the woman who owned the house, but I would imagine what that was like going in, and what it was like to sit on her porch or be one of the young men in the neighborhood that would cut her lawn. But this was my first feeling of Lincolnville, feeling of home, feeling of the community, because there are several houses like this that have not been remodeled or updated that speak to a different time. So I wanted to capture this as a way to always feel that period. And that's what I do with my work. It is about creating the work and maybe a body of work. It's not the first and foremost on my list. It's about documenting a moment, a period in my life, and where I was at, both physically and emotionally and spiritually, and documenting that with images. And this is the First Baptist Church, a very historic church in Lincolnville. It's known as the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, the cradle of the Civil Rights Movement in St. Augustine. Mount St. Mary's Missionary Church was known as the cradle, because the first meetings of NAACP and Southern Christian Leadership Council, they used to meet at that church. But this is where a number of meetings took place, and Dr. King was a part of that, Ralph Abernathy was a part of that, Andrew Young was a part of that. So I wanted to document this church at night, and riding by at night, you can see how beautiful it is. It's peaceful. And I was a guy who grew up in the church, so I can certainly relate to and imagine the hymns being sung, the shouts of joy, or cries of despair in these sanctuaries. And before civil rights marches and after civil rights marches, people would gather at these churches. So it was very meaningful to me to celebrate these structures, with this being the first one, celebrate these sanctuaries, with this being the first one. So I would have to run, if there was a fire, God forbid, and I would have to run and save these two as a pair.
Okay, we'll let you get away with that.
Okay.
All right.
And it's interesting too how, because of the artists in residency here, that these separate bodies of work, and I have 30, that how they came together to form an exhibition. And I can't thank Julie and Helena enough that they helped me
Navigate,
fine-tune and navigate, fine-tune that vision and make it more concise. And if it was up to me, I would have 50 images in here. But the director, I think her eyes were rolling in the back of her head when I said, yeah, we could do 30 or 40. But she is both Helena and Julie, the director, have helped select, I think, the best of this particular collection. And for me, the exhibition is not an end point, it's a beginning. Because now that this body of work is formed, it's taken on its own life and energy and purpose, I can add to it. I can go back and get more portraits. There are a couple more structures I want to photograph at night, and there's a couple more stories about who lived in Lincolnville. Like, right. I just heard about Chris Lightburn, He was an alligator wrestler at the alligator farm for 20 years.
Oh my God.
And a neighbor of his daughter came in from Lincolnville and told me about him. And I was like, what? And that was a part of the story. The other part of the story is that he, with Doug Carnes, started the Lincolnville Festival
Oh yeah, Doug Carnes.
in
Yeah, the jazz-
1979.
jazz music.
So I get these tidbits of history.
Yeah.
I hear about a person, tie him to an event, leads to another event. So those stories are still coming. And so we just hope to add to this body of work, and
Okay.
who knows where that may lead.
All right. So let's
So the third image I would save in an emergency, high water or hellfire. Hopefully neither one of those things happens anytime soon. It would be this image that I call the protest at the Ponce Hotel. And this depicts 150 students from Murray High School in West Augustine. I think it was in either late 63 or very early in 64. Against the principal's rules, they walked out of class and they walked 2 miles to the Ponce Hotel, which is now Flagler College. They walked over to where the dining hall is, and they walked into the dining hall to do a sit-in to protest segregation. I believe it was 155 of them came down, and 100 were arrested. And they were brought out of the dining hall into the breezeway here by policemen and police dogs and cattle prods. And so I wanted to dedicate an image dedicated to them, because you think about it, these are 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, maybe 16-year-olds that are walking out of school to protest this segregation. And fortunately, when I was doing an artist residency, I got 3 Flagler College students to help me set up this image. And I wanted to tie that generation from the 60s to this present day generation, many of whom probably don't know what happened in the 60s or what happened in the 60s, how that has allowed them to be going to school at Flagler College today. So I wanted to bring a couple of the students together to just show them and have them be a part of history.
Right. It's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, Lenny, I could be here all day talking to you. Thank you so much. And I know the community, not just the African American community, but the whole community, just feels you're a godsend. And your work is really a history recording in a whole different way that will live forever. I mean, imagine once we're all gone that young kids will be looking at these pictures and they'll say Lenny Foster, and they'll look a little Wikipedia thing about you.
He was a cool cat. And that was a main motivating factor, because I was inspired by Richard Twine, who was a Lincolnville photographer in 1922. I was inspired by Harry Fleming, Twyla Fleming's dad, who was a Lincolnville photographer in the 60s and 70s. I was inspired by John Jackson Sr., Thomas Jackson's father, Thomas Jackson, the president of the St. Augustine Historical Society. His dad was a photographer, and he documented West Augustine and St. Augustine and Lincolnville in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And recently, Teresa Siegel, who lived her and Joe lived in St. Augustine for 20 years, and she documented a lot of structures, a lot of homes. And so I was inspired by their work, and I'm just getting in line. And
you become part of the spiritual journey of that whole line in the universe. Now you're in that line, and who knows who will follow you, inspired by what you're doing.
Yes, we want that, whether someone a year from now, 10 years from now, or 20 years now, of course, because the city, the community is changing every month, every year. Just like inspired by the Harlem Renaissance photographers, James Vandersea, who was known as the picture-taking man in Harlem, and Roy DeCarva, and of course Gordon Parks.
Yeah, that was the guy, Gordon Parks.
They photographed Harlem and New York at different periods.
Yes.
And being able to access all of those, you see how the community has changed and what people, how their lives were then and what they went through, and maybe in some ways can honor or foretell what might happen in the future. But one thing we can be assured of, someone will see it and someone will go, hey, I didn't know that. Or hey, I want to do something.
Right.
And that's what we want.
Yeah. Once again, my friend.
Thank you for the honor. I really appreciate Helena and Julie, the director, of honoring me with a museum show, because not everyone can do that or has the opportunity.
Thank you to keep inspiring us and others who will see this, and also will want to do their own search of history through the lens of the camera.
We hope so. Thank you.